Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. I am in a good mood. We have got like actual spring southern weather rolling into my neck of the woods up here in north central Wisconsin. I mean, the last couple days we've been mid 60s. Most of the snow has melted, unless if it's on the north side of a slope, we definitely still have some snow sticking around. But the river by me is starting to open up really good. I mean, the backwater is still frozen, but you can actually get a boat out now if you want to do a little walleye fishing. One of the launches is ice free, and it just has me in a good mood because I think based on the weather forecast, I might be able to get a boat out around the house here by the beginning of April, if not even a little bit sooner than that. Uh, which is really nice. Anytime we have ice out right around April 1st, I'm a pretty happy camper with that. So we've got that happening here, and that has me thinking about doing a video for those fellow Northerners and what baits I like to go with right after ice out. And if you're a Southerner, don't tune off right now because these baits work down south too. Generally, you're talking about the baits that are going to work, for your late winter, early spring season. The difference, if you happen to live up by me, where you do freeze over for a pretty extended period of time, is our pre-spawn window is shortened up dramatically. Down south, I feel like you have these big waves of fish that start spawning really when the water could be anywhere in the 50s, all the way up into the 70s and potentially even up into the 80s. So you have a much larger prolonged spawning window down south.
Today's video is brought to you by the Deep Dive app. This has had an amazing new update. As you guys know, I love the water clarity feature. As you can see right here, we're looking at Grand Lake, which just had a whole pile of rain come into it. It went from being really clear to having a lot of dirty water coming in the bottom end of it. Just an amazing feature to be able to determine where the clear water is versus the muddy water. So Deep Dive has just also introduced Stream Flow. Now this is a really cool feature that shows all of the water input coming into certain reservoirs and the amount of water coming in. So they measure it in cubic feet per second. You can see in this case, this is just a small creek, but then you can see the projected as well as the previous flows. If we move up the lake here, get into one of the larger rivers coming in, you can see here that we've got 490 cubic feet per second. And then it shows you that there's not much of a change expected. Now, if there's some rainfall coming, I'm sure those projections will change. If we scoot on over here to take a look at Kentucky Lake and Barkley Lake, much larger river systems, the Tennessee River, you can see what the projected outflow is going to be there, 28,000 cubic feet per second. Go check the Cumberland River here. We got 9.4 thousand cubic feet per second. Just an amazing feature that allows you to see all of the different water flows coming into the different parts of the lake. You can see which ones might be the most affected, which ones won't be affected, see what the projected outflow schedules are. A major feature to help you catch more fish. And that's on top of some of the other new features like the wind effects. Now, the wind effects is really cool because we've had wind effects as part of the app in the past, but all it did is show where the wind was hitting the shoreline the most, as you can see from the dots, the orange and bright red dots, which indicate where the wind is really striking. But now the wind feature also indicates what the wave action is like on the lake itself. So some of the features you're going to get from this is determining where to get from place to place safely by avoiding the heavy, rough water conditions. You'll be able to determine where you may have some of the strongest current flow and some of the places where you can fish to stay protected. Now, along with that, you still have some of my favorite features like the patterns that you've got on the lake that indicate the best baits and lures to fish with. You've also got the water inflow app, which shows you where a bunch of the rain input comes in. That can be an amazing pattern to fish throughout the year. Just a great feature to have. So many positive features anytime you're fishing or using the Deep Dive app. Just points you in the right direction to catch more fish. Whether you're a tournament angler or a local fun fisherman that's just out to catch a few fish, the Deep Dive app will help you catch more fish next time you're out on the water.
Up here, what generally tends to happen, is we go pretty much from ice out to spawn within a few weeks. And the reason for that is we generally have to have temperatures that are pretty warm to melt the ice. And the thing is, once it melts the ice, because we have warmer temperatures where we have weather that's sustained 60 degrees, if not warmer than that, the water temp rises real quick and the fish go pretty much right into a spawning mode. So a lot of times our ice comes off, like where I live, for example, it'll be early to mid April, and the fish are spawning potentially by the end of April, if not early May. So it's only a few week window. So our pre-spawn period is short, but from a bait standpoint, one of the nice things about it is what tends to happen is you get a lot of your shallower bays ice out first, and those are also the areas that warm up the fastest. So there's very much a correlation there regarding, yeah, the ice melts fastest, so that water warms the fastest, but it's really because those areas uh warm the fastest that the fish move into them. So a lot of times you're talking about your shallow bays. A lot of times you're talking about areas where your pads grow. So if you're on a natural lake that has a big bay with pads, that'll be one of the first places that ices out. If you've got cattails, if you've got shallow weed growth, mud bottom, lots of wood, those are going to be the areas that tend to warm the fastest. And that's what I'm going to be looking for right after ice out. And a lot of times those fish actually winter in those areas. They don't, it's not like they move into them once the ice melts. A lot of times that's where they're at all winter long, especially the largemouth. Now, the smallmouth a lot of times will be out more main lake. Once the ice comes off, they'll start moving up to their staging areas. But these lures will cover both largemouth and smallmouth. So one of the first things I'm always doing, if I'm talking about a natural lake that has some shallow bays, or if I'm talking about a river system that has some backwaters, I'm going to be looking for those shallow areas. And a lot of times you do have areas that are full of dead water, but then you also have areas that you have really good concentrations of fish. So I'm going to go into those areas throwing a swim jig. A swim jig to me is a great search bait, great through shallow grass cover, great through these areas that warm up really fast. Personally, I like a bluegill color one, just because a lot of times not only do you have bass in these areas, but their primary forage, which are bluegills up north, are going to be in those same areas. They're all part of the sunfish family. So I really like a bluegill color. This is our guilty pleasure. This the core tackle swim jig. I've got a Reaction Innovation skinny dipper on the back. This is going to be one of my absolute go-tos. Now, once I've located those areas where I think a lot of fish have moved into with the moving baits, that's when I'll tend to slow down with a smaller finesse jig. So this is the Picasso Little Spotty. You guys hear me talk about this a lot. And then I've got a little 3-inch Pit Boss, a Berkeley Pit Boss on the back. And I'll go pick apart all the cover that's in those areas. So it could be, some lay down trees. It could be stumps. It could be dock posts. It could be pad roots. You get those big tubes that the pad roots are. Those are objects that are going to hold more heat. And a lot of times those fish, even though the ice is melted and those areas are warming faster, those objects in those areas that absorb the heat are going to be your prime targets for a lot of your staging fish. So a little jig, a little weedless jig is going to be one of the key baits to break down those areas. So those are some of my favorite places. Another place I'm going to tend to try to find, not all places have this, but if there's some stretches of riprap, so it could be causeways, it could be a shoreline homeowner has put some riprap in, it could be a river system where maybe you've got some riprap that's been put along areas where maybe you have some erosion, which a lot of times are leading back into some of your spawning bays and spawning backwaters. When I have those situations, I'm going to pick up a little crankbait. So this is a Fritz Side 5 by Berkeley. You guys hear me talk about this bait quite a bit. It's hard to beat a good, small, flat-sided crankbait during the pre-spawn period. Whether you're down south or you're up north, when you've got your coldest water of the spring, there's something about it. So a lot of times those rock areas that I just mentioned are going to be absorbing heat and producing a lot of heat. and it's hard to beat a little flat side along them. So if I can identify some areas like that, another really good thing to look for too, if you're on natural lakes that have like dredged channel systems, maybe there's a community and you've got some channels that go back into those communities. A lot of times those areas will not only have bridges, but they will also have riprap along the shorelines because they were dredged and they were man-made to begin with. That little frit side can be excellent in those areas as well. And those smaller canal systems, or I should say the canal systems, they don't have to be small, but they're smaller areas of water, so they warm faster. And a lot of times they do have some deeper water access nearby, being that the channel has been dredged. And a lot of times those channels are where they spawn as well. So they have everything they need in those little channel systems. Now, if I'm talking about maybe some man-made lakes that don't necessarily have shallow bays, or they've got a lot of smallmouth mixed in, that's when I'm going to start concentrating more on my break lines. So a lot of times if you have tight contour lines, so a steep drop off that leads into a shallower bay, and I'm not talking about a shallow mud bay, but maybe just a shallower bay for that lake. Maybe there's a lot of 8 or 10 foot of water. I'm going to concentrate on those break lines that go from real steep to tapering. Those are really good transition areas. And in the same thing, those same big flats or those bays, I'm going to be looking for any sort of big boulders or rock veins or rock transitions. And in those areas, I'm going to go with one of two baits. I'm going to go with a jerk bait, and depending on water depth, I may go with a really deep diver. I may go with a smaller profile. Generally speaking, the Stunna 112 regular or the 112 plus one are going to be the two go-tos, and then I'll adjust from there. But a jerk bait, an absolute must-have cold water bait. And at the same time, I'm also going to be looking to throw a small swim bait. This is a little 3-3 Kitech. I've got the Core Tackle Tush jig head, and I'll go throw this around in those same little areas where I throw the jerk bait. Some days, sometimes it feels like they really like the jerk bait. Other days, it seems like they really want the smaller swim bait. So I'll just play around with those two. But you're going to be keying in on those isolated targets out more on the main lake and main bays if you don't have some of those shallower water areas. And a lot of times that'll be geared more towards your smallmouth, but you'll definitely catch largemouth too. So as soon as the ice comes off, you'll be able to get out there, start catching a bunch of fish. It actually can be some of the best fishing of the year. And depending on the state you live in, you may actually not take advantage of it because maybe you have a closed season. Maybe you've got catch and release. I know in Wisconsin, we've actually increased the season where you can fish catch and release wise, which is really nice. The river that I'm on is year round, so you can fish it. It just depends on what your regulations are. But some of the best fishing of the year takes place right after ice out, the same way it takes place right before it ices over. So hopefully this answers some of those questions. I get a lot of questions from fellow northern anglers regarding fishing right after ice out. And a lot of times the question is simply, can you catch fish? Like, how long does it take before the fish start to bite after ice out? And in reality, it's like you can catch them while there's still ice on the water in some instances. You'll be in a shallow bay that's warmer, main lake can still be froze over, and it can be some amazing fishing. So hopefully this helps answer some of those questions. I'll put links to all of these baits to Tackle Warehouse. If you want to support the channel, use my affiliate links. That would be greatly appreciated. And other than that, stay tuned. We'll have a new video coming out tomorrow for you.